I'm Shelley LeBlanc, dietitian with Nova Scotia Health Authority, primary health care, working within Richmond County and the community. So today I wanted to touch base on making every bite count and providing you with some different ideas for protein that provides us with extra protein that we need for the maintenance growth of our muscles throughout the body, as well as some vitamin B12 and good iron, so that we are getting enough through what we are eating at our meal times to be able to provide that through food. Now, as we age, we might need a supplementation of vitamin B12 because of the lack of absorption throughout our body. With age, that happens. So it might be something to check in with your doctor about. But I just wanted to provide you with some ideas of what counts as protein, because we tend to associate protein with like meats, poultry, fish mostly. So what are some different ideas? So let's look at meat, poultry, and fish. Here I have a drumstick. So it should be about the size of a deck of cards. But as you can see, the size of the palm of the hand as well as the thickness of the hand, it should be able to fit in there. So that would be one serving of meat. We're looking at a pork chop, similar. And a lot of you might be laughing like, oh, I'm going to starve if I follow her recommendations. But I guess the basis of this is that you have a certain amount of meat, but yet you balance out your meal with other foods from the Canada's Food Guide from different food groups. So half your plate vegetables, looking at adding some starch in there, getting an appropriate portion of meat, and as well, if that's not filling enough, you might want to look for a fruit for dessert or even a glass of milk to complete that. I have a hamburger patty, again, thickness is the size of it's the size of the palm of my hand as well as the thickness of my hand. So this is some tuna. So basically it would be appropriate, like half a can of tuna. This would be the same as canned salmon as well. So I always suggest the one that's canned in water, and what you can do, because there's some salt in there, is kind of rinse it off to remove a lot of that salt product. I have 3/4 of a cup of beans. So this would be an appropriate serving for being plant-based protein. All right, so sometimes we tend to eat a larger portion of beans at meal times with some extra bread. So what we want to do is balance this out as well and try to accommodate our meal with a starch, whether it be rice or whether it be certain type of bread or biscuit or roll, and some vegetables or fruit. So I also have canned beans here. So this is basic in tomato sauce. There's no fat added to it. Still the same amount, like 1 can doesn't equal a serving. So what else do I have? 1/4 of a cup of nuts here. So this would be great just to snack on in the afternoon or in the evening, just 1/4 of a cup. These are almonds. I also have some peanuts here, salt-free options, right? Let's look at that. 2 eggs would be a serving. So these are fried eggs. Some healthier alternative would be having boiled eggs or even scrambled eggs. And eggs, these can be added to salads. They can be eaten with your breakfast. They can be a side to your meal. And when we think about a big breakfast where we have fried eggs and bacon and ham and sausage, that's a lot of protein sitting in one meal, but also a lot of processed meat there. So anything that's cured or pickled or smoked or salted, like bacon or sausages, ham, those would be considered processed meats. So we want to steer away from that and try to keep those portions of those meats in moderation. This would be a piece of whitefish. This is tilapia. So this would be another example. I have some cottage cheese here. So this is very high in protein, and I do have a lot of clients who like that. So whether you eat it with fruit and maybe some crackers on the side, kind of balancing out your meal. Or you can add it to a salad if you wanted to for some extra protein in your salad. Even adding it as your protein source at your meal time with your vegetables as well as a side of starch. So it could be rice, it could be some potato or sweet potato, that type of thing. Cottage cheese is a good alternative compared to the meats and fish. So I have 2 cottage cheese here. This would be an example of 2 scrambled eggs, no, 1 medium egg, sorry. 1 medium egg, so a little bit more. 2 eggs would be a serving of meat and alternatives. So eggs can be at breakfast time, and you don't always have to have it at breakfast. It can be an easy lunch. It also can be an easy supper, right? So if you're stuck on what to eat and you have eggs in there, it's a cheap alternative for a good protein source. Another cheap alternative for protein source would be the beans. So the tuna. I've got sardines here as well. So sardines in spring water. So the same concept, half of a can here, like the whole can is not the serving because they're high in fat, these ones. So we want to kind of keep half of a can as a serving. You could eat these. I know clients who eat sardine sandwiches, eat them with crackers, eat them as a side with their salad or some extra veggies, that type of thing. So another source of protein would be that you can find at the grocery store is a plant-based mix. Legumes and lentils. So peanuts and beans fit into the legume category. And this would be a soup mix. So this is a mix of barley, lentils, beans. There's some rice in there. So it's a mix of grains and lentils and legumes. So what we want in there, we might want to cook this up and add it to a sauce. If you had a spaghetti sauce or something like that, just a plain marinara sauce, you can add it. Or you can add it to soups and casseroles to be able to provide you with that extra protein. So sometimes when people are stuck for something to eat at lunchtime or even supper, I suggest getting a bag of the soup mix, getting some low sodium broth, getting some frozen vegetables or whatever vegetables you have on hand, whether it's frozen or canned. If they're canned, you can rinse them off, or some fresh vegetables. So getting a slow cooker or a pot, adding your low sodium broth to it, adding some soup mix, which is going to give you your protein source and some grain, and then adding in some of those vegetables. If you like it hot and spicy, you get to add your own seasonings. We all have cupboards that are full of spices that we may or may not use, and that might be another segment for another day, but you choose what you want to add to your soup and flavor it the way that you want, trying to keep that salt level down to reduce your salt intake for the day. So these would be some lentils, dried, I think these are some peas, I'm actually not sure. Let's cut that one out.
Okay. We'll just leave it with the soup mix.
Yeah, I'll stick with the soup mix. So these would be some red lentils here. They're in a bag. So you just buy them in a bag where the beans are. And how you would cook this is you rinse and drain them, and then you place them in water. So one serving of these dried lentils to 3 parts. So 1 part of lentils to 3 parts water, and then you bring it to a boil. You reduce the heat, almost like a similar way that you would cook rice. So the ingredients are on the back of the bag. So what you can do with this is you can add them to casseroles. I've also added them to a spaghetti sauce and kind of blended it into a spaghetti sauce to be able to provide some plant-based protein to that. I also have some red kidney beans here in a bag. You can also buy these options in a can, salt-free, depending on where you're doing your groceries. It's something, if they don't have it at your local grocery store, you might be able to ask for it to come in. But you can buy it in a can, which makes it so much easier. You don't have to rinse them off and boil them off and let them cook for a long period of time. You just have to open up the can and kind of rinse them out and be able to add them to your chili or to your soup or to a casserole. So when I say casserole, sometimes we are stuck with things we don't know what to make for supper. So if you know that you have some pasta there, or you have some leftover rice, and you have a can of beans, and you have some frozen vegetables, same concept as I just mentioned with the soup, you're able to kind of put those things together, rinse off your beans out of that can, or kind of boil these ones off and get an appropriate serving, and then put them in with your starch. So whether your rice or your pasta, add in some vegetables of whatever you prefer, whatever you like, and then add your seasoning to that. You don't have to add like creamy sauces or a lot of butter or anything like that. Some people add some canned soup for flavoring. If you're doing that, maybe choose some low sodium soup options, as well as a small amount of soup and not the whole container of soup. But for the most part, we do have a lot of spices and herbs that we can play with. And what I can do is provide some recipes to have at the end of this show, or not necessarily recipes. I can provide some ideas of what spice goes with what foods and what can be appropriate. Kind of keeping the salt down through the run of the day. Another option is tofu, and tofu is not something that I have a lot of clients that eat, but it's something that I always try to introduce because it is another cheap alternative to a protein source. It's plant-based, soy-based, and this is 1 ounce, so 3 of those would kind of fit in the palm of my hand. And it comes in different textures, so this would be more of a firm tofu where you can marinate if you wanted to in a flavor of your choice, and then stir fry it up with some vegetables, add some rice to it. You can add it to soups as well. You can cut it really fine and add it into salads. So it is kind of a chewy texture at times, but some people love it, and I do incorporate it with some lasagna. I kind of blend it up with some cottage cheese, and then that just gives an extra protein source that's plant-based. I have some peanut butter here, so a serving is 2 tablespoons. It doesn't necessarily fit in the palm of my hand, but this is what's recommended. And so this is a good source of protein and quite easy for just putting on toast in the morning, or if you needed that extra oomph in the afternoon, some crackers and peanut butter would work well. As I mentioned in the beginning, we tend to be meat eaters, so trying to focus different parts of the day with some different options. And I wanted to provide you with some non-meat alternatives because they're still healthy for us. And in the run of the day, a lot of times I try to educate and support people for eating healthy, but cost is always an issue. So these are also some low-cost options that can be at the house that can go a long way if we make it go a long way, right? So if we're making a batch of chili, we don't necessarily need that red meat in there. We have the kidney beans, so that's still gonna give us some good protein. Just jam pack it with some vegetables that you would have on hand, whether it's canned or frozen or fresh. Still great options. If they're canned, we just wanna rinse them off. Eggs are a great option, and again, you can add that to some soup. You can also add it to stir fries, to some rice that you're cooking up. You can add it to some casseroles, or you can just eat it as a protein source. So the almonds, the peanut butter, the tofu, they might not be things that you have at home all the time, but there's still some good options to have at home for some good protein to provide you with a low cost protein, right? To keep you strong and maintain your health for that.